Hi everybody. Welcome to Sonic the Hedgehog, an unfortunate history.
Nobody cares, Max.
Thanks, Clayton. For those of you who have had an instance in school where you were like half done with a project with a group member and they didn't show up and then you had to give the project that day, that's what this panel is. Because my friend bailed on me on Wednesday. And he's a good guy. I know, right? It's okay though, because you all came, so I can make all of you disappointed. We're at Sonic the Hedgehog, an unfortunate history. My name is Max. I am with the Foundation for the Preservation of Gen 1 Pokemon. You can follow us on Twitter at 5thGen, not PKMN. I highly recommend following us on Twitter because I want Twitter followers. It makes me feel like I have a big penis. So we're going to talk about the history of Sonic today. Mostly Sega, because that was the part I did. We were supposed to do Sonic. So we're going to start at the beginning of Sega, when they were service games. Oh no, is it? Wait, why isn't it working?
Is it plugged in?
I can hit buttons, but that's way less fun. Okay, so Sega started as an arcade company. So here we have a noted arcade anime, Magical Sharpening Arcade, and a Bunamashi. I know that arcade means street, but I don't give a shit. This is what Japan was making. Sega was making. So their whole starting thing was like, we're going to make arcade games because that's the thing we could do. There are a lot of thirsty sailors in Japan after World War II, but America didn't want to do like the whole Nanking thing to Japan after they'd done to China because China wasn't really a fan of that. So we had to come up with a better plan. So that plan was gambling machines. Yeah. Where are they trying to ban these now? Like everywhere? Yeah, cool. That's okay. Fortnite sucks anyway. So, that's my only applause for the night. Yeah. Oh yeah, everybody, you're all wearing your rose-tinted glasses, right? Yeah. That's the only time Sonic was good, was if you wear these fuckers. So, they were making gambling machines for a while. I'm gonna take these off because everything is so red. So they made gambling machines for Japan, and mostly Americans at like military bases. And at one point, the army's like, hey, actually maybe we shouldn't have gambling machines at military bases. That feels like a bad idea. So they stopped doing that, and service games became Sega. It was like, ah, shit, pivot. Let's, we were at military bases, we know what they like. They like shooting things. So they made an arcade game called Periscope. When they released Periscope, they had no faith in it working out. They're like, okay, it's a quarter to play, which is insane because it's 1968. And you're just looking into a periscope, like as a submarine trying to shoot shit down, like, found him, bam. That was the whole game, but people loved it, and Sega was shocked, and they're like, oh, maybe we could charge 50 cents. But let's do a couple things. One, it puts Sega on the map as a game producer, something that to this day they have never lost, even though they should. And second, it actually standardized the whole like quarter game format. Like after Periscope, people were like, wait, people pay 25 cents for like 10 seconds of entertainment? Fuck yeah, let's do this. So Sega made Periscope. They were in the arcade business, and then like Russia, they had a weird idea, which was to totally change gears. Like, let's have a revolution in the country, in the company, and we are going to make video game consoles and convert to communism. This is the one joke from the whole panel, so you better like it. Thank you. All pander. So, they released their first console, the Sega Master System, even though the Sega Master System was not the first iteration of that console, because initially it was the Sega SG-1000, and because Sega is just fickle as fuck, you got a lot of different versions of the Master System, because there's the Sega SG-1000, and that didn't take off, so instead of like, hey, let's make a new console, it's like, no, let's just make it look different. That was the problem, it was too white. So then we got the Sega SG-1002, and I was like, I'm still confused, no one's buying it, I know. Sega SG-1000 Mark III. Because they took a page out of like Xbox naming scheme. It's like, no, not 1003. That's too simple. Let's add some shit to it. So we got the Sega SG 1000 Mark III. They released it in America first as the Master System. Like, oh, someone bought it. That's cool. Let's release it everywhere else. And then that's how you got all this shit. It actually had built-in games, which was crazy for the time. Not really, but crazy thinking back at a time where you could have games built into consoles. Because if you look at the consoles from the 70s, those all had built-in games because that's how video game consoles worked in the 70s. If you wanted to play a new game, you'd have to get a new console that had that game on it. But it wasn't a problem because all of the games were Pong clones. And if you played one Pong clone, you played 8,000 Pong clones. This is a good idea. So they included like an actual game, like there were racing games on these things, and Snake. They normally have like 2 or 3 things. So you could play games straight off the console without buying cartridges, which once cartridges became a thing was really out there. And, oh yeah, they released a different version of it. This is the Sega Master System girl. I'm not even kidding, it's this girl on it. This is real, I did not have to Photoshop it. I promise you that, I'm not good enough at Photoshop to do that. If you've seen enough of my panels at this point, you'd know that. Thank you. Especially because I made this, not Clayton, he's the only one that actually puts time into it. So, how did the Sega Master System do as a console? It did okay. You know, like the first Russian, like, communism thing didn't, like, kick off too well. Russia just kind of floundered and, let's have another civil war kind of shit. So, it outsold the Nintendo in Western Europe, Brazil, and Australia. Because blue is for Sega and red is for Nintendo. As we went over the 5th Gens and Pokemon panel, all historical conflicts are determined by red versus blue, which is why Sega had to be blue. Nintendo was already red. They didn't get a choice. They were assigned to the color by society. Nintendo very clearly won this generation. The NES sold 61 million units to the Master System's 22, but because the Master System had such a higher attachment rate of games, game sales were actually pretty even between the 2 companies. So if you had an NES, on average you owned 8 games. But if you had a Master System, on average you owned 21. Which is the highest attachment rate of any cartridge-based console. Not counting DLC games. Because I don't think they count like games you download for money anymore, that's too much work. But yeah, so because of that, Master System did pretty well. That's like part of the reason it sold was Nintendo was like, oh, we're only gonna let good games on our console, and Sega's like, nah, anything, let's do it. You made E.T., let's just release that, E.T. remastered. And where did Sega Master System do best? Brazil. It sold 8 million units in Brazil. That is more than 1 in 3 of all Master System sales. As I know, Europe was only 7 million. The USA was 2, and Japan was 1 because Japan didn't trust Sega, apparently. Maybe because they were at all the military bases. In fact, they still sell Sega Master Systems in Brazil. So you can go to the store and it's like, do I want an Xbox One, a PS4, or a Sega Master System? And there's still people who go, yeah, fucking Sega Master System. It has Sonic. And it's bad Sonic, but it has it. So part of the reason the American sales were kind of bad was because instead of Sega, marketing the console themselves, they hired Tonka to do it. That's not a joke. That's a real thing they did. Because when I think how to sell video games to children, I think truck companies. And they didn't do that well, so. And then we got the Sega Genesis. And as you notice, I haven't talked about Sonic yet, that's because he hasn't shown up, but we'll get to him eventually. Play. Oh wait. The audio's not hooked up, I'm a liar. We're not getting anything. Okay, so that's the Sega Genesis ad.
You just plug the audio jack in.
You know what, shut up, Clayton. I'm not doing my job. I should know how to do this. Where's your audio jack?
On the other side.
Hey everybody, I'm really bad at paneling. Come to my other panels. I got 1 at 2 and 1 at 4. Okay.
I'll be at the 1 at 4.
Yeah, he'll get the one at 4. That was worth
That one
going
will be
to.
done professionally.
It's still not making noise. Oh wait, because I muted your computer. Wait, how do I turn up your volume? There's no immediate button for it. I have to hit up. God, that's so confusing.
Yes.
You can hear it, right? It's not just in my head. I mean, look at those fucking revolutionary 16-bit graphics guys, right? So the Genesis came out in 1989. It was designed to compete. We still can hear it. There it is. Look at it. That's my childhood right there. I wasn't a Nintendo kid. I had a Genesis. My first game was college football. I think my dad was trying to get me into sports. It did not work. I'm at an anime convention, and I'm 28. So, the Genesis was a 16-bit console made to market against the NES. So that's like, showing up to the sandbox as like a 12-year-old and kicking down a 5-year-old's castle. Like, it's fucking easy to do. They're like, oh, Genesis does what Nintendo. That's because Nintendo software is 4 years older and they're still working on a new console. This is dishonest marketing. It took Nintendo 2 years to come out with the SNES. So that gave Sega 2 years to establish a foothold in the market, and they wasted that fucking time. Because instead of like having good games or anything, they had Brutal Legend or whatever. Well, I don't know. I forgot what it was called. It's that unremarkable of a game that it came packed with. And then, but they did have one good idea, which is, of course, to work with Tom Clancy, who is a hero. If you don't know anything about Tom Clancy, you should. He's the reason Sega was like viable in America for a few years, and they fired him, and then they weren't anymore. So, Altered Beast. So Sega was selling the Genesis at $200 with Altered Beast, and that was more expensive than the NES because the NES was cheaper to make because it was a shittier console. So a lot of people are like, why would I buy a Genesis for my kids when I could just buy them the NES since that has Mario? And the Genesis has this really scary werewolf that's going to give Timmy nightmares. So Tom Clancy showed up and he's like, no, 150 Sonic. And Nintendo Japan's like, Sega Japan's like, no, that's a terrible idea. He's like, fuck you, you hired me to do this. I sold Barbies. You know how hard it was to get Barbies on the market? That shit was tough. For those of you who are unaware, it was really weird, the concept of selling like full-grown woman like dolls that had boobs. Like, no, when that was a thing and people were at toy shows trying to buy Barbies, they'd look at that and be like, are there nipples? Is there a vagina? No, this was a real thing. They would investigate the Barbies to make sure they were not anatomically correct. So, a lot of toy vendors were very cautious to carry Barbie dolls. And Tom Clancy's like, fuck you, we're doing this. And then he showed up and he's like, Sega, I'm going to make you the next Barbie. And Sega went, we want to be a failure. And they did listen to him though. They did release the Genesis at $150 with Sonic the Hedgehog. And it did well. Blue is Sega, red is Nintendo. So this is, this is really when communism was kicking ass. They got their shit together after World War II, and they were winning. So what are the sales here? In America, the Genesis actually outsold the SNES 25 million to 20 million. I'm probably including peripherals in there. My sources were very inconsistent. It outsold the SNES in Europe 2-1. And it was outsold by the SNES in Japan almost 6-1. So Sega of Japan is like, yeah, we understand how to sell consoles. And they clearly fucking don't. Because they won in Japan and Germany. And as we all know, Germany was very hostile to communism, so of course they're not going to accept the Sega Genesis as their Lord and Savior. The Genesis also had one of the highest attachment rates of any consoles, again, at 16 games per console sold, compared to the SNES, which was still at 8, which is still okay, I guess. So, back to that slide, talked about Altered Beast, and then they had Sonic. I did all my slides out of order because I know what I'm doing. Now, the thing about Sonic, though, is he's actually the first Sonic OC. The origins of Sonic trace back to Charlottesville with the noted visionary Kristen Weston Chandler. Who invented Sonichu, the progenitor of both Sonic and Pikachu, making him the inventor of Sega and Nintendo, meaning he is the father of all video games, and we as a society need to stop making fun of him. So let's make fun of him. I've been wanting to riff on him for like years in a panel, and I finally found a way. So, Kristen Weston Chandler, revolutionary that he was desperate to please women, which is why he made that great sign that says, I have to read it here, 21 and single white male seeking cute 18 to 21 single female for companionship. If any men see this sign, mind your own business. Yeah, no, he's great. He wanted them to be white, he wanted them to be Christian, drug-free. He generally used terms like boyfriend, free girl. So of course the internet made fun of him a lot, and it was a lot of fun. This is his art, as you can tell, it's brilliant, and even Miyazaki can't do that shit. And he invented anime, as we learned at the last panel. Though I would contend that Karl Barks invented anime, and you're wrong. It's in a later panel, don't worry, kids. So, yeah, what's this comic about? It's about our hero Sonichu. And by that I mean for about 2 comics, it's about our hero Sonichu, before it just becomes Chris dealing with his shit in real life. Like the cops who keep kicking him out of malls for holding that sign out. Yeah, he's good. But there was more than just Sonichu that Sega pulled from Kristen Weston Chandler's world. In early drafts of Sonic, he had a human wife. Because of course he had a human wife, her name is Madonna. And, yeah. Fortunately, they never actually gave him a human wife. Really happy about that, aren't you? Next, they were going to put him in a band. I'm going to be honest, I would play that. It'd be my first rock band game. Because Sega was looking for a mascot, they needed to be fun, perky, because it's the only way to fight Nintendo. Because again, NES had Mario, Sega Genesis had that weird werewolf thing. So Sony, there's so many words that start with S, I can't do this. Sonic, we're gonna put him in a band, we're gonna give him a girlfriend. They were like looking for direction in their life, kind of like Beto O'Rourke is in his presidential run. He hasn't been, he's cool, it's just, classic Gen X problems. So, in designing Sonic, instead of actually, trying to come up with something organically, they're like, okay, how can we be the opposite of Nintendo in every way imaginable? Mario's slow, Sonic will be fast. Mario uses 2 buttons, Sonic will use 1. As a note, this was the hardest thing for them to program around, because they're making Sonic games. Like, wait, how can we pick stuff up? How can we interact with the environment if all we can do is jump and move fast? Because in the first Sonic game, there were no spin dashing. You just ran, and eventually you'd start spinning if you were going fast enough and you could jump. So they had to do a lot of programming around how to make a game interact with 1 button, which is why even though Sonic 1, I've put the glasses on before I say this, totally holds up. This is what actually made it very interesting and something that makes it worth revisiting, even though Sonic is a raging dumpster fire of a franchise. Mario's red, Sonic is blue. Mario's wholesome. Sonic is edgy. Mario promotes animal cruelty. Sonic does, but in a much more roundabout way. Mario made a really bad movie. Sonic made a movie so bad it retroactively made Mario's movie good. Yeah, I think that's the last one of us.
Fill it with fire.
Oh yeah. Mario is timeless. Sonic was dated the moment he came out. But Sonic was really popular when he came out. He sold consoles, so like shit. We got you know, in Soviet Russia, they would reimagine photos to remove people. So they reimagined games to exist on previous consoles. So they remade Sonic the Hedgehog for the Game Gear and the Master System after it came out on the Genesis, but it was garbage because they couldn't replicate the physics engine. So it's just, they're like, hey look, and no one's like, this is good Genesis. Why would I get a fucking Master System? No one wants those. The other thing Sega did to really sell consoles, because we're moving away from Sonic again, because he's a fucking loser, and Sega's way cooler, let's be honest. They made their games as edgy as possible. What happened was, when the Genesis came out, video games were still like this kid thing, so Nintendo was like, okay, people don't bleed, they're full of sand. When you get a bloody nose, it's a sandy nose. Which seems to indicate to me they were beat up on schoolyards a lot. And Sega's like, no, it's blood, you fucking idiots. So they put it in blood, which created this weird feedback loop where Nintendo's like, fuck you, Sega, and Sega's like, hey, look, we have blood. So Nintendo kept trying to attack Sega, and all it did was drive sales of Sega consoles, leading to like a whole video game hearing where Joe Lieberman, noted piece of shit. Yeah, woo. Like the 5 people who remember him. He's because we don't have universal health care. Yeah, fuck you, Joe Lieberman. So, he was like, how dare you put blood in video games? And Sega's like, so? And it's like, yeah, how dare you? And Sega's like, we're on the same team here. It's like the whole energy drink thing, where all the energy drink companies were held together, and like, you guys need to stop irresponsible marketing. And Red Bull's like, we agreed to never sell energy drinks in more than 12-ounce cans. And Monster's like, you already don't do that, fuck you. So, you know, given the Genesis was doing well and the Soviet Union was doing well at the same time, we had to see time the joke back. It's here, it's to stay. Sega had to start adding 5-year plans to their console to increase its longevity. Just like the Soviet Union had to do that to kill all of its people. So, first we have the Sega Game Gear, and the 32X. No one cares about the Game Gear, I am the best with panels. So, you would plug the 32X into the Genesis to give you 32 bits. It looked okay. Like, as far as an attempt to be in the 5th console generation, it was fine. But the whole concept was basically Sega of Japan's like, Sega of America, we need a 32-bit console because we're not going to give you the Saturn for like a year. And Sega of America's like, that's dumb. And Sega of Japan's like, no, you're getting a new 32-bit console, it's just a Genesis with slightly more colors. And Sega of America's like, who the fuck would buy that? If you're going to do that, just make it an add-on. And they meant that as a joke. And Sega of Japan did not receive it as a joke. And that happened. And you know, it looks like, a mushroom. So here's an image of America applying a 32X to Japan. Next, we have the Sega CD. CDs were a big thing. Like, oh man, we can put CD games. Just like the Sega CD was a physically large thing, here it is in comparison to a Genesis. You gotta plug that shit in, it's tough. And the CD cost more than a Genesis. It didn't come with a Genesis, but it cost more than one. And you could use it to listen to music, play Night Trap, which, why are you okay with abducting children? Or, that's about it. Like, who gave a shit? So it was also a very bad 5-year plan that sold 6 million units for some fucking reason. Versus this was sold like 500,000, and this was sold 2. Next we have Sega VR, which was, yes, a thing. And yes, that is an actual mock design for it. So, Tom Kalinske was trying to keep the Genesis relevant because they had a huge market, while Japan was trying to shed the Genesis and make a new console because it wasn't doing well in Japan. So Tom Kalinske like, let's do VR. So they met with the Virtual Boy guys, looked at their VR and went, no, this is terrible. Who would ever work with you? And he said that to them. And then Nintendo worked with them. Because you're going to quickly realize everything Nintendo did, Tom Kalinske beat them to. So he beat them to the Virtual Boy, except realized it was fucking dumb. So he went with a new company to design a VR headset for the Genesis. Now they already did like weird 3D goggle shit for the Master System, so they knew what they were doing. Not really. It cost $200 and it never hit market after getting delayed for over a year because they quickly realized after they had a final product and spent millions of dollars advertising for it, quick is not the right word here, that it made people sick because VR gives you motion sickness. However, their eyes were not as fucked up as the Virtual Boy, so at least they got that part right. What was the next 5-year plan? Oh, the karaoke add-on. Yes, it's real. Why? Come on, Sega, get your shit together. The next thing, this is a Sega Genesis computer. It is the Tetra Drive. It costs $1,100 in 1991 money. There's a reason nobody owns a Tetra Drive. And when you put all of this together, you get a command economy, which looks kind of like that. And while Russia and Sega were out there like piecemeal ordering parts of the Genesis to put them together and make a coherent console, America was out building homes from Sears catalogs, and we all know how well Sears is doing now. But before we move on from the Genesis, let's touch on some other classic Sonic games. We have Sonic 2. Tails is also the second Sonic the Hedgehog OC from the hit webcomic Tails Gets Trolled. Which, really when it comes down to it, is the inventor of Western literature canon. It brought us such notable characters as Wile E. Coyote, Skeeter, the Tricks Rabbit, Chester Cheeto, Cosmo, Kermit the Frog, and the idea that weed is good for you. Thanks, Knuckles. He smoked his smart weed, so his plan is great now. It was also the inventor of musicals. Yes, this is real. The first 10 chapters of Tales Gets Trolled are available to listen to as a musical on Spotify. Which means that Sonic the Hedgehog, Tales Gets Trolled also invented Phantom of the Opera, and not just the Hamilton musical, but the idea of Alexander Hamilton. Who, as you all learned from our panel blurb for Dubs Are Better Than Subs, was the inventor of dubbed anime. No, you're not that deep in our lore, get your shit together. What was the next Sonic game? It was Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Now, Sega had a lot of star power in America going into Sonic 3 because the first 2 Sonic games were good. So, because of that, they got like someone really famous to help on the soundtrack. However, they were a noted child diddler. That's the wrong one. 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 There are a lot of child diddlers in history. That's what we're going for here. There we go! Michael Jackson. So Michael Jackson was helping on the Sonic 3 soundtrack until, of course, he was found out he was a child diddler. At which point they just took his music and made it OC Do Not Steal. And then released it for Sega 3. Sonic 3. And because there was the N Knuckles add-on, because they were trying to produce it all as one game, realized they didn't have the time, so they made it as 2 games. Which I guess is the first expansion pack DLC thing. This is what it looks like when you play Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Actually, this is what it looks like. For you forgot there were 2 bombings, we had to do both of them. And to match the maturity of their fans, Sega also released a Sonic game on the Pico, which is a console that exists, and that's all I have to say about it. So let's talk about the Sega Saturn. Too real? Okay, let's talk about Tom Kalinske failing to convince Sega of Japan to make the Sega Saturn good. So, Project Reality, you all remember that as the N64. You know who they worked with before they worked with Nintendo? Tom Kalinske. He had like in paper, an agreement for them to design the processors for the Saturn, only for Sega of Japan to go, no, they're American. We're not doing that. This is in-house. And Tom Clancy's like, fuck you. This is all we have. Have you seen what you're doing? It has 2 GPUs. You're fucking insane. So that didn't work out. So, but you know, Nintendo had a lot of enemies. Sega wasn't the only one. So Sega's like, hey, what if we work with Sony? So Tom Clancy, again, made an agreement with Sony. What happened was the two of them were going to develop a console together. And it was going to play games. Sony was in game publishing at this point. They made a couple games for the CD, so they already had a working relationship. And fucking hated Nintendo after the whole everything. There's too much there. So they were ready to eventually enter the video game market. So Sega was like, hey Sony, let's make a console together, we'll split the losses. We'll publish our games, you publish yours, and we keep the proceeds from our own published games. Sega's reasoning being, we actually publish good games and make good games. Because Sonic 3 and Knuckles was good. Notice the glasses are on the ground, I stand by that. I'll say that. Yeah, woo! I'm so brave. So, yeah, they tried to do that, and they're like, yeah, Sony's gonna fucking fail at this because they don't know how to publish shit. They made Sewer Sharks. Who cares about Sewer Sharks? That's almost as bad as that 90s cartoon. That was it Super Sharks? I can't remember. Street Sharks. Those are, I even have it in a panel. I'm really bad at my job. I'm riffing this, so give me a break. So that did not work. Because Sega of Japan's like, no, we don't need Sony. And Tom Clancy's like, they're entering the fucking market. You're designing your console specifically to compete with them, and you're fucking it up. And that's what happened. So then we got the Sega Saturn. Okay. 'That was the only Sonic game for the Sega Saturn. So, that is what Sega imagined them doing to the competition. That is, in fact, what the competition did to Sega. That's slide twice. So, here's the Sega Saturn, brought to you by Ice Cube, because as we all know, Ice Cube is like the best video game reviewer. The Sega Saturn released at a cool price of $399 on a random day that nobody anticipated, sending 1 or 2 consoles to each distributor and not giving any to KB Toys. If you're concerned about how to launch a successful video game console, it's not how you fucking do it. They said they were going to release it in November. You don't send them go, today, here you go. We put 2 on the shelves. KB Toys, you don't get it. KB Toys is like, that's fine, we're not going to stock you for the rest of the console. And it worked. KB Toys never sold a Saturn, and they didn't lose a cent. They went bankrupt for entirely different reasons. So besides having 2 discrete GPUs and 2 CPUs, and using polygons instead of triangles, making it a fucking pain in the ass to program for, and costing $100 more than the PlayStation, this was its controller. Yeah, but this is the worst one. I know there are a lot. I have Sega Saturns. I'm a collector. That's my favorite because it hurts my eyes. And I want you all to feel my pain with me. So this led to some weird economic warfare between Sega and Sony, where Sega was having to like outcompete and they were losing more money per console than Sony was. And this is really comparable to how America finally beat the Soviet Union. Most of you were probably taught that it was because we ramped up our military spending super hard and the USSR wasn't able to compete with it, so they ended up bankrupting their nation and collapsing in on themselves, much like what happened to Sega. But no, it's because the Soviet Union didn't produce any Sonic games for it. It's fucking obvious, get your shit together. But you know, we got some reformers showing up. None of them were Tom Clancy because he quit because Sega didn't fucking listen to him. So we got some reformers, you know, the USSR is going to open up, talk to people, not be fucking incompetent. Sega, of course, doing the same thing.
This is the day you have trained for, the day you have trained for. Utilize your superior skills, your superior intelligence.
Sit down, brother.
Oops. Don't make me hurt. Learn to defeat your ruthless enemy, Steve, a Hackensack.
Donnie, you're gonna get rude.
Shut up, bunch of bitch.
I agree, we should all tell tales to shut the fuck up. So Dreamcast comes out 9/9/99 after Sega announced the Saturn isn't their future, killing all Saturn sales. Because they're really good at cutting out their consoles before they're actually done living. They did the same thing with the Genesis, where they stopped making games for it before the Saturn came out. Because, hey, we have a big install base, let's not use it. So Dreamcast comes out, there's a lot of fighting over that, mostly because Sega Japan wanted to charge twice as much to let it also play Sega Saturn games. And Sega of America's like, don't fucking do that. No one has a Saturn here. They're not gonna buy this for that. So the Dreamcast comes out, and it's fantastic. It does everything right, including collapsing the Berlin Wall. Because it didn't really matter at that point, no one had faith in Sega. The Dreamcast sold almost as many units as the Saturn in a much shorter amount of time. But the fact that the PS2 was coming out and played DVDs was enough to just kick the shit out of everyone in that generation. Don't cheer. But this did start leading to a cultural exchange between Sega and the rest of the gaming world. So like how America gave Russia McDonald's, Sega would import out Sonic games. And this is the last good Sonic game, Sonic Adventure Battle 2. Adventure 2 Battle, if you hate me.
The child wasted too much of my time.
They did, and it also, as you can tell here, it did a lot for soap sales. You know those cool shoes that you could like slide on? This is of course not a soap sales graph, I couldn't find one of those, but this is a chart for the profits of Colgate, so I'm assuming they're the same thing. Because soaps, same fucking thing. So Adventure Battle 2 came out, it was like the last good Sonic game with a Metacritic score of 89. It was my childhood, it was everyone else's childhood, and I hate to break it to you, but we could have had better childhoods. I didn't mean that for that. I forgot what I was going for. But before we go more into Sonic, let's talk about terrible Sonic characters, i.e. the inspirations for everyone since Tails and Sonic, because we haven't done that for a while, so here's Knuckles. Knuckles is of course based on noted Jackie Chan Adventures character Hawk Fu. Thought I wasn't gonna get that in here, did you? We made it. It's canon. Dr. Eggman is of course based on Elon Musk. Just give him a few more years and a couple cheeseburgers and he'll get there. Espio Charmy and Steve Irwin's Persona are of course based on the band Creedence Clearwater, who, as they know, were not born on the bayou, they were born in Berkeley. And the song Green River is about Pewter Creek, which, wait, let's excited. Yeah, it's literally based on Pewter Creek in Davis.
I love them more now.
Huh?
I love them more now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Amy Rose is based on your girlfriend from Canada. I forgot the animation on this slide, I'm sorry, I ruined the punchline, but she's not real, that's the point. Big the Cat is of course based on Bigger the Catter. My OC Do Not Steal. Cream, or whatever the fuck her name is, because I don't even remember anymore, is based on Coffee Mate. This was a corporate tie-in, they really had to get it going. Shadow the Hedgehog is based on the first AMV you ever watched. I don't know why someone made a Sailor Moon AMV for Crawling in My Skin, but they did, and that was the easiest Google of my life. Like, we put time in these slides, that one took 10 seconds. AMV Crawling, why is this here? Let's do it. Silver is based on the state of Nevada. And Blaze the Cat is based on Pacific Gas and Electric. If you saw the Pokemon World panel at SAC Anime in winter, this is the extent of that panel, is just blaming PG&E for shit. So when you see that panel in an hour, everything's new because that was the only joke and I just gave it. And of course, version of that is based on that moment you were sexually attracted to rabbits. Which, yeah, fuck that. So, no, but don't. But don't. So, now we have to go into the Space Jam furry pipeline, which is a fucking thing. Space Jam invented furries, and then they found a national audience in Sonic the Hedgehog. Because they're like, Lolo's pretty hot, and Sonic is like, hey, you like that? Let's see what you got. And it's like, yeah! And then they drew that shitty fan art. And then came the first Space Jam convention. Now, here's the thing though, Bill Murray thought it was about him. So he showed up and he was emotionally scarred, and that's why his movies aren't as good anymore. He's just like, I need to stop trying because this is what people think of me.
Is that why
I'm gonna
Garfield
just-
is a thing?
Huh?
Is that why Garfield is a thing?
Yeah, he made Garfield in response to thinking that was a convention for him. He's like, if I voice Garfield in a movie this bad, no one will ever want to be a furry again. And it didn't work. It made it worse. So here are the scores of modern Sonic games listed as official canon. As you know, they actually don't seem that bad until you realize that we're using like video game scoring rankings, where like 80 is okay, because video game journalism is a crock of shit. It's not a Gamergate reference. Those people are fucking crazy. It's just video game journalism's crock of shit anyway. But you know, there's enough to give people hope. You know, like people who think Trump is still popular for some fucking reason, are the same ones who think we're going to get a new Sonic game that's good. The problem is, Trump can still win, and Sonic can still make a good game. And we don't want either of those to happen. So now you're expecting that I'm going to go into modern Sonic lore, and that's just not going to fucking happen. You know how many games there are? I don't have time for that. I spent like 30 hours watching YouTube videos to prepare for this. But yeah, okay, fine. I don't actually have to say anything. This is just traumatic enough for everybody. So instead of talking about why Sonic the Hedgehog 06 is bad, we're going to talk about why Sonic the Hedgehog 06 made these scores, which are objectively like not that terrible, seem all 06 scores. Sonic 06 was kind of like the first game to come out in a time where the internet was big and accessible to everybody. Before 06, if you wanted the internet, you'd have to go to YTMND, named Rest in Peace. It was a good meme site. Versus Newgrounds, which was a good meme site. Oh, this is my favorite prop. So, what happened was, Sonic 06 came out, it was terrible, and everyone's just like, we need to shitpost about how bad this game is. And they did, and it worked. And ever since then, everybody's just been like, yeah, every Sonic game is bad. So whenever my friend's like, hey, have you played the new Sonic game? It's actually good. I'm like, Tyler, you're full of shit. There never is going to be a good Sonic game. Even Sonic 3 sucks. Like, retroactively, this was so bad, they're all bad. That's how it works. And he's like, no, it has a 70. I'm like, yeah, what the fuck's that mean? That's like a C-. You gonna brag about getting a C- on the thing you do professionally? Apparently they will. And because Sonic's like multi-platform now, it's starting to influence other consoles. Kind of like Russia's influencing other countries' elections. I'm not done with this joke. It's here to stay. Thank you. So yeah, Russia's out there fucking with other countries' elections. Sonic's out there making shitty games for other consoles to make them sell poorer so people might buy the latest Sega Genesis flashback. No one ever buys a Sega Genesis flashback. Every one of those is terrible. They do not know how to make those fucking things. So it's led us into this kind of Cold War, where nobody wants Sonic to keep going, but it does because we can't do anything about it. Like, And sometimes we do goodwill, we invite Russia to the Olympics, we let Sonic into Smash. As a note, the only reason Jackie Chan didn't get that slot was because he protested Smash Brothers over them not accepting Waluigi. So they will be released together in a DLC pack, and if they're not, I expect all of you to shitpost on Nintendo of America and Japan, and fuck it, Brazil's walls until they do. Yeah, fuck Brazil, they think the Master System is good. So, just like we can't do this to Russia, we can't get rid of Sonic. Because if you get rid of Sonic, you let these people out into the world. And you don't want any of this out in the world. I mean, if you let Sonic fans out of the Sonic fandom or have them quarantined, they're going to escape out. They're going to join other fandoms. Suddenly, you're going to have, weird Sonic, there's already Sonic anything crossover, but something like every fandom you're in is going to be as toxic as the Sonic fandom. And also the programmers for Sonic Team, they're going to have to go somewhere too. So they're going to have to join other programming groups. Suddenly Drake's Uncharted will feature Shadow the Hedgehog. Do you want that? You don't. We need to contain this virus within itself. So yeah, as we went over, it will lead to a cultural destruction, the likes of which we've never seen. Just like if we nuke Russia for being pieces of shit, it will lead to a nuclear holocaust and everyone will die. They're the same thing. So, thank God that's over. These are the list of my panels. If you hate yourself, I'm doing We All Live in a Pokemon World at 2, which will be just as unprepared as this. At 4, we have Make Anime Great Again. It's much more prepared, right, Clayton?
Yeah, I'm in it.
Yeah, fuck you. And Monday at 10 a.m. we have Waluigi time where we talk about games. That should feature Waluigi. So, if you want to come to the other panels, that'd be great. Thank you all for coming. I hope you had fun. If you have any questions, I don't give a shit. I'm almost out of time, so what do you want, Clayton?
I feel like there's already a leakage of